Okay, turn to Job, chapter 5. Job chapter 5, verse 7. Job 5:7, yet man is born unto trouble, as the sparks fly upward. Everybody knows that concept of sparks flying upward. Take a tree branch, bang it together on something, you watch the sparks fly up. Light a flame, flame goes up. Smoke goes up. So there's certain attributes in life, there are certain characteristics in life that are they're so basic that everybody gets it. And one aspect of life that everybody gets, because we all live life, we all experience life, and that is that life is a series of troubles. Your troubles are not necessarily my troubles are not your troubles. So it's hard for us to really empathize or sympathize with each other, because if my trouble isn't yours, you can't really get inside me to see what my trouble is doing to me, and vice versa. I can't get inside you to see what your trouble is doing to you. So a lot of times we go through our lives as Christians, we say, oh, pray for me because I've got this, that, or that. And we say, oh yeah, I'll pray for you. And then we trip on down the road because we can't relate to it on an experiential level. Another verse in the same line here. That's the same place, same book, chapter 14, Job chapter 14. I just want to lay this little foundational thing before we get into the text here. Job 14, verse 1. Man that is born of a woman is a few days and full of trouble. Doesn't matter if you're a little kid troubles to them are every bit as monumental as troubles are to us. Kid doesn't worry about losing the home or losing his job as such, but because he doesn't get along with one of the kids in class, because he's afraid to go out at recess because somebody wants to pound him and beat the snot out of him, his little problems to him in his world are just as big as the problems that we have in our world. You get to be old. Well, I don't worry about getting laid off anymore. I don't have to worry about getting up Monday morning and going to work anymore. So someone would say, God, what a boy, you got it made. What a life, You don't have any troubles at all. You don't have to contend in the workplace anymore. You don't have to put up with lousy bosses anymore. You don't have to put up with deadlines anymore. Just life is just so sweet and so wonderful. Yeah. I just have a different set of problems now. That's all. We all have problems no matter where we are, what stage of our lives. Financially, Bill Gates does not have the same problems I have. I don't have the same problems Bill Gates has. I don't have to worry about the stock market at all. If it goes down 400 points and he loses, 5% of his wealth, well, he's lost, $20 million or some stupid thing. Stock market goes down 500 points. I haven't lost anything because I don't have any money in the stock market. I couldn't care less. I understand that there's a residual effect that if everybody goes broke, it's going to affect me in some way. But again, my problems are not somebody else's problems. But we all have problems. That's the whole point of that deal. Problems come in various forms. We've got spiritual problems. We've got health problems. We've got financial problems. We've got relationship problems. That just about covers probably 90%. of the problems that we have. The Bible is very, very clear that God basically cherry-picked what he wanted to be included in this book. Now, I've used this analogy 100 times before. Take anybody in that Bible, Abraham, for instance. Abraham starts in Genesis chapter 12, when God calls him to be his guy. And Abraham is mentioned for, another 10, 20 chapters or so. But if you took every single incident that is mentioned in the Bible about Abraham or what Abraham did, and you lumped them all up into a little ball, it wouldn't represent 1 month out of the life of Abraham. He was sitting in his tent, with the flaps open, trying to get a little breeze and so forth in the heat of the day, and 3 guys come up, and he begins to talk to them. All right, well, we have that little episode that took place, and it represented maybe a half hour in his life. He's talking to Lot, and they're looking out over the landscape, and their respective tribes and stuff are getting too big to be one big lump, because the grazing lands, the watering, the wells and so forth is just, there's too many people now, so they have to divide up. So Abraham's going to take his group and go here. Lot's going to take his group and go there. So they're standing up looking over the landscape, and Abraham says to Lot, which side do you want? You want the left side? You want the right side? If you go here, I'll go over there. So we'll ease the burden on the land and so forth. So Lot picks a side. That conversation, 15 minutes? So in other words, you go through all the things, the slaying of Isaac, or the sacrifice of Isaac. You take all the incidents that takes place that are recorded about Abraham. As I said, put them all together, maybe a month. He lived 175 years. Everything is like that. God cherry picks what incidents he wants to include in the Bible. He cherry picks what events he wants to record in the Bible. Why does he do that? Turn over to 1 Corinthians. We looked at this verse before. We'll look at it one more time here. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. And I'll tell you, if you really get this one aspect of Bible teaching, really, really conceptually get it, it's going to open up a whole new eyesight for you on this book. The book is not just a bunch of random events, a bunch of random sayings, a bunch of random things in there. They're all in there for a reason. As I said, God cherry picks to put these things in there. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11. Now, all these things happened unto them for ensamples or examples, and they are written. Why are they written? They are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the worlds are come. He's talking about Old Testament stuff here. All the events, all the things, all the people, they're all written down for our admonition, so that we can learn, or we can be warned, or we can take heed, or we can get encouragement. I mean, if some poor schmuck is going through A, B, and C, and we happen to be going through A, B, and C, then God puts the event of that poor schmuck number 1 in there, so that schmuck number 2, us, can come along and relate to it and say, oh, he went through this, God allowed him to go through that, or Satan put him through this, but he made it out the other side. Oh, well, I guess my condition isn't necessarily hopeless. I'll come out the other side. So all the things that are recorded in the Old Testament are recorded, cited, cherry-picked, put in there for a reason. And they cover a whole range of subjects. As I said, spiritual, financial, health, relationships, reputation, security, all these things are included in there. And in the inclusion of these, God picked one man who encapsulated 99% of all this stuff any one of us at any stage of our lives is either going through or will be asked to go through or forced to go through. One guy encapsulated them all. It was so extensive, and the piling on was so extreme that God gave him a whole book. He gave him 42 chapters in this thing. Incredible. This one man, obviously, is Job. You got financial problems? God's going to put somebody in that Bible who had financial problems so that you can be encouraged. You got health problems? He's going to put somebody in that Bible who has health problems so you can be encouraged. You got a reputation problem? You got a security problem? You got a relationship problem? God's going to find somebody, and he's going to put them through the same thing you're going through so that you can look back and read this stuff and be encouraged by it. That's why I said, if you get this concept fixed in your brain, this whole Bible takes on a whole different meaning for you. It's not just a bunch of little words and sayings and verses and so forth. It's a personal note to you from your God. He makes it very, very personal. In the case of Job, this stuff is basically broken down into two parts. You remember how it all began. There was a day when the sons of God presented themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself to the Lord. God looks at Satan and he says, "Where have you been? What have you been doing?" Now, it's not like God didn't know. He's letting Satan just vent and talk. He says, "Well, I've been walking up and down and to and fro in the earth and so forth, just doing my thing." And God said, "Have you considered my servant Job, an upright man, a man that fears God, who hates evil? So have you considered him?" And Satan had considered him. He says, "Oh yeah, I considered him. And he doesn't fear you for nothing, though, does he? You've got a hedge around him. You're protecting him. You're keeping me away from him. You won't let me at him." God says, "Really? Yeah. You let me at him for just a few minutes, and I'll show you what this guy's really made out of." Look at verse 11, chapter 1. Job 1:11. "But put forth," this is Satan speaking now, "but put forth thine hand now." He's talking to God. "Put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face." That's how Satan thought Job was going to respond after God took away the hedge, took away the protection, and allowed Satan to get to Job. Verse 12. "Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon himself put not forth thine hand. You want Job? You got him. Just don't touch his body. See, he can't wait. He is happy now. He goes off and he is going to do his thing. So the first part of Job's quest here, his trial and tribulation, has to do with possessions and so forth, things. And I'm going to include the kids in there too, because now it's not an emotional type thing, it's a possession thing. Just don't touch his body. And you remember, Satan takes away the oxen, the sheep, the camels, the donkeys, all the servants. And he ends up taking the kids. Job had 7 boys and 3 daughters, 10 kids, all of them gone. Now, right then and there, this guy has been reduced from the richest and the greatest man in all the East to now just an abject pauper. I mean, his 401k is gone, his security is gone, his stocks are gone, his bonds are gone, his home is gone. I mean, he's finished. He's done. He's an old man now. He doesn't have time to rebuild all this stuff. So his possessions are all gone. Satan can't touch his body yet, but he took all of his possessions. Now remember, Satan's contention was that if you take everything that he's got, I'll get him to curse you to your face. He took everything he had. What was Job's response? Look at verse 20. Chapter 1, verse 20. Then Job arose and rent his mantle. That means he took his cape and so forth, his cloak, and just ripped it in half. Shaved his head and fell down upon the ground and worshipped. Ooh, Satan didn't see that one coming. Job didn't stand there and shake his fist at God and said, God, how could you possibly take my kids away from me? How can you take my living away from me? How can you take up all my security, my future? How can you take all this stuff from me? Now what am I supposed to do? I mean, you talk about room for bitching and griping. You talk about a reason to bitch and gripe. If anybody ever had one, I would say, from a human perspective, Job had a reason to be angry with God. He had a reason to not trust God. He had a reason to just give up and say, well, if this is what God is all about, I don't want anything to do with God. If God's going to do this to me, a good man, a just man, a righteous man, I didn't do anything wrong here. If he's going to do that to me, then phooey on him. I don't need him. That's what Satan was hoping for. Fell down on the ground and worshipped. Verse 21, and said, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed, blessed be the name of the Lord. He took my possessions, he took my livelihood, he took my security, he took everything I had, and most of all, he took my kids. Blessed be the name of the Lord. What kind of a mindset do you have to be to have that frame of mind after all this thing hit? How close is your walk with God that you can walk through that valley of the shadow of death and come out with that response at the end of it. Satan didn't know Job as well as he thought he did. In verse 22, in all this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. Have you ever blamed God for anything? I know I have. It might not be a lifelong charging. I, finally come to my senses and repent and ask God to forgive me. But there's been a lousy, long time. Many things that I've charged God with. Why did he let this happen? How come he didn't prevent that from happening? Why did you let this go? How come this? How come that? Why this? Why that? Now, Job gets up, tears his cloak, shaves his head, prostrates himself on the ground, and worships God. He gets a whole book, 42 chapters in his book. I don't find any book in here about Ronnie. I'm looking all through here. I don't see one stupid, I didn't even find my name in here. Gee, shock. Well, there was a second part of this duel as such between God and Satan. And that's basically what it was. Job is just the innocent schmuck bystander here. He wasn't the reason or the cause for any of this stuff. The second part was, now remember the first part, God said, take everything he's got. Just don't touch his body. That didn't work. That fell through. So Satan ramps it up again. He says, yeah, okay. I get that part. He didn't cave, he didn't fall through, he didn't blah, whatever. Okay, but if you let me touch his body, now we'll have another whole different story here. God says, okay. Chapter 2, verse 6. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, he is in thy hand, but save his life. Now remember the first round was, take everything he's got, but don't touch his body. That didn't work. So Satan comes back. God ramps it up. Okay, you've taken everything he's got. All he's got left is his body. You have his body. Just don't take his life. And then the fight goes on again. His wonderful, sweet, adorable, helpmeet wife, she's got his back. She's in his corner. She sees what he's going through. She's a recipient also, by extension. I mean, she lost all of her sheep, all of her camels, all the oxen. She lost her 401. She lost her security. She lost her, pension. She lost everything too, just like Job did. How was her response? Look at verse 9. Chapter 2, verse 9. Then said his wife unto him, dost thou still retain thine integrity? I mean, you've lost everything. God's taken everything away from us. Our kids, our livelihood, our security, everything that we lived all of our lives for, everything that we worked for, everything we slaved and sweated and bled for. He's taken it all away. And you still retain your integrity? Curse God and die. Well, that's what he needed at that point. That's the perk up he wanted. That's the pat on the back. That's, I've got your back, honey. We're going to go through this together, honey. Oh, yeah, don't worry about it. It'll be okay in the end, honey. After all, the preacher did say for better or for worse, in sickness and in health. Oh, yeah, you can count on me. What's he get? Curse God and die. What's his response now? I mean, we got the first one, naked came I out of my mother's womb and naked shall I return. In other words, I came into this world with nothing. I'm going to go out of this world with nothing. Then it gets all ratcheted up again. What's his response now? Chapter 2, verse 9. We saw that part, curse God and die. Verse 10, his response. But he said unto her, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this, did not Job sin with his lips? I don't know what this guy was made out of. I don't know what he was trying to prove. I mean, God obviously saw something in this guy that nobody else saw. Satan didn't see it. Obviously, he missed it. His wife didn't see it. She missed it. His 3 friends that came, they missed it. They didn't see it. For 38 chapters, we have this dialogue between Job and his 3 best friends going on. None of them saw it. But God saw something in this man. After he loses everything. After now Satan has gone and ravaged his body. And when we're talking about boils, it's not just, the occasional boil, over here that, hurts or itches or aches or pusses or whatever thing. This was big time bad stuff that was happening to him. The only physical relief, and when we say relief, it wasn't any relief, it was just the best he could do, is find an ash heap. You take some combustible stuff, you burn it down, and now all you have is ashes. Now, anybody who's ever had a fireplace, a regular wood-burning fireplace, understands the concept of ashes. They are unbelievably soft. You just barely poof on them, and they'll go. It's the easiest thing that he could find to sit in or lay in that wouldn't hurt him as much. Sitting in a chair, it hurts. Laying in a bed, it hurts. So he finds himself an ash heap, and he lays on the ash heap to try to find some relief. His wife just, for all intents and purposes, just dumped on him big time. He's lost his kids. He's lost everything that he's got. And his response, hey, we've received good things from God. Can't we get some bad things too? In all this he sinned not. So in a nutshell, God initiates this conversation with Satan about Job, knowing how Job is going to respond. Satan doesn't have a clue. He blew it both times. But God knew how he was going to respond. And he knew that, 4,000, 5,000 years later, there's going to be a bunch of people walking around, Christians, who are going through problems that can relate to something like this. They've either lost jobs, or the stock market crashed and they lost their security, or they've lost their health, or they've lost kids, or they've lost the reputation and the help of their wife, or what happened. He saw all these people and he says, I got to give them something to hold on to. I got to give them something that they can be encouraged by, and they don't give up when they're in the midst of this. So he puts the book of Job in here. And then he tells us in Corinthians, all these things are put in there as examples so that you don't have to just fly apart when they happen to you. So God initiates this dialogue with Satan, knowing how it's going to turn out. Puts a limitation on it. Take everything he's got, just don't touch his body. The effect? Everything goes. Oxen, camels, sheep, donkeys, kids, everything. Response? Naked came I into the world, naked I'm going to return. Big deal. It's just stuff. The next conversation between God and Satan ratchets up. Satan says, let me have his body. A man will do anything to save his own skin. God says, you're on. Just don't kill him. And Satan pushes it to the limit. Loses his health. Emotional chaos. Because he doesn't understand what's going on. It's not like God gave him a heads up and said, listen, Joe, you're going to go through a period in your life right now where it's going to get really, really tough. I'm going to allow Satan to do this, and Satan's going to do that, and so on and so forth, and you're going to suffer terrible loss. He's in the dark. He has no idea. We listened to him going on for 38 chapters, defending himself, saying, I know bad things are happening to me. I know that it looks like the hand of God is against me, but I really haven't done anything to warrant this. And his three friends, his three lifelong friends, are sitting there looking at him and said, you're as dumb as a hammer. God doesn't do this kind of stuff to somebody who doesn't deserve it. God doesn't do this kind of stuff to somebody who hasn't earned it as such. So the fact that you're in this mess proves that you're a lousy guy at heart. And Job says, I'm not. I'm really not this bad to warrant this much junk happening to me. They say, well, we don't believe it. 38 chapters this goes on. Back and forth between these four guys. God saw this coming. So Job's lost everything. His best friends don't respect him. They don't believe him. They don't trust him. His wife has emotionally abandoned him, kicked him out, lost the kids, lost everything. His response, shall we receive good at the hands of God and not receive evil? A few chapters later, in the midst of this dialogue between him and his buddies, ex-buddies, as it were, in the middle of that, after they get done for 13 chapters telling him how lousy he is, what a liar he is, what a hypocrite that he is, that God has abandoned him, God doesn't love him, God doesn't respect him, God doesn't care for him, he comes back with what I consider probably one of the greatest verses in the whole Bible. You guys might be right. I might be totally wrong. I might be the biggest piece of junk on the face of the earth. God might hate me to the day he dies. But I'll tell you this, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Trust him? What do you mean trust him? He's already taken your livelihood away. He's already taken your security away. He's already taken your health away. He's already taken your kids away. He's already taken your wife emotionally out of the picture. He's already taken your best friends, the reputation and the trust built up over, a 40-year period or 50-year period here. He's taken all that away. What do you mean you're going to trust him? There's nothing left to trust about. You've lost everything. And yet in his heart and in his mind, he's still in the game. He hasn't given up. He hasn't quit. He knows what he's lost. He knows what was at stake. He knows how far he's fallen. He knows the only thing he's got left, the only thing he's got left is his last dying breath. That's it. He's lost everything else. Though he slay me. That's the last thing. He kills me. Throat. Heart attack. Embolism. Who cares? Though he slay me, yet will I trust him. That's why he gets a whole book in this book. That's basically it, what I had to say. I got two little comments here I just throw in as an addition thing here that doesn't really have that much to do with the story. But I find this type of stuff interesting, and you can make of it what you will. After chapter 2 and verse 7, the first two chapters, it's basically Satan and God having a dialogue. Satan and God having a dialogue. Satan and God having dialogue. First two chapters, Satan's mentioned a whole bunch of times in there. After chapter 2, verse 7, Satan is not mentioned the rest of the book. It's not about him. It's about God and Job. Satan was just the schmuck that God used to initiate this whole thing and get it going. Once he had served his purpose, he's out of the picture. He's a non-entity at this point. His name is never mentioned in the rest of the book. His wife, his loving, caring, adoring helpmate. After chapter 2, verse 10, she is never mentioned again. I always find that type of stuff fact because I know there's a meaning in there. I know that there's a little dot that has to be connected with something else in that book. And it's one of those things that it's always floating around in my head, and one of these days I'll find the other dot to go with it. But I threw that out. Maybe one of you guys can find that dot and connect it up right there. So, I don't care what you're going through. I don't care what's happened to you. There's an example that God put in this book to cover your situation so that you can maintain hope, that you can maintain trust, that you can get encouragement, and you can hold on and retain that little bit, that little semblance of a connection with God when he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this book. I thank you that you didn't just leave us high and dry, say, well, you're a Christian now, good luck. I hope it all works out. But Lord, you've given us a blueprint. You've given us a flashlight. You've given us a map. You've given us a road marker, signs in the skies, whatever. You've given us a route to chart. You've looked at all the contingencies. You've looked at all the problems that we could conceivably be expected to go through. And you've covered it someplace in this book. Maybe somebody in here is going through something that wasn't specifically covered in this particular part of the scripture, but we know it's covered someplace else. And so, Father, knowing that, if we can't relate to Job on a personal level, there's somebody else we can relate to in this book. Father, give us the brains to get into this book, to find those people, to find those circumstances that we can relate to. See how it worked out for them. See what they did. See what the purpose of it was. How it came out in the end. And then maybe we can get to a point that we won't dwell on our problems, that we won't dwell on our particular individual hang-ups. But we'll put it in the right perspective. Came into this world with nothing. I'm going to go out with nothing. Shall we receive good at the hand of God? Why can't we receive evil out of the hand of God? And at the end of the day, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Thank you for this example. I'm sorry that Job had to go through this just to be an example for us. But Father, I did read at the end of that book that once it was all said and done, after all the dust had settled, that you ended up giving him twice as much as he had before. What a God. I thank you in Jesus' name.